for a while, and then I'll turn the lights down.
Sure.
This morning,
For a slide or two.
this evening, on behalf of the COA for the Evening and Weekend Lecture Series. The series tonight lecture is the civic and scholarly importance of the Arnold Arboretum in the 21st century. As you may know, the series is co-sponsored by the Wellesley Council on Aging and the Wellesley Free Library, and generously funded by the Wellesley Hills Junior Women's Club. Before getting into tonight's presentation, I'd like to say thank you to the people who have made this program possible at the library. I'd like to thank Kathy and Elise. I'd also like to thank the Evening and Weekend Lecture Series Committee, and some of the people are here. I also just always have to do this. Where is Ashley? Ashley. So Ashley is the person who creates and does all the amazing program work at the COA, and she always deserves a round of applause. Thank you. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce, am I doing all right? William Ned Friedman. Ned is an evolutionary biologist who studies the origin and early diversification of flowering plants. His studies have fundamentally altered century-old views of the earliest phases of the evolution of flowering plants, Darwin's so-called abominable mystery. He is also deeply interested in the history of early pre-Darwinian evolutionary thought. As director of the Arnold Arboretum, Friedman has worked to expand the Arboretum's societal impact through diverse initiatives in public programming, enhanced communication between scientists and the public, and a reinvigoration of the long-standing relationship between the Arboretum and the biodiversity of Asia. In early 2016, after 4 years of extensive planning, a 10-year initiative was launched to shape and augment the living collection of the Arnold Arboretum for the next century. Plant exploration around the globe will bring 400 species of woody plants, including many threatened with extinction, to this Frederick Law Olmsted-designed botanical garden in Boston. And please join me in welcoming them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you did terrific. All right. Well, thank you for coming out tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. How many of you have been to the Arnold Arboretum in the last year? This is my kind of group. All right. How about the last week? Oh, a little soft on winter. All right. Well, I'm going to hopefully change that. Okay. Well, it's an extraordinary period of time at the Arnold Arboretum, and I want to share a variety of things that have to do with both our academic mission as part of Harvard University, and importantly, our mission as a botanical garden and cultural institution in the city of Boston and for the region, and just get a little bit of a sense of what's going on here at the Arnold Arboretum. Now, most of you will know that this is how we are situated. We are the southernmost point in Harvard's sort of Cambridge to Boston operations. The college campuses in Cambridge on the north side of the river, business school, the medical school, School of Public Health are all south in Boston. And so we're just a little bit, about 2.5 miles south of the Longwood area. But we are one of the largest parts of the Harvard campus system. I'll just let you know, there's more acreage at the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University than there is all of the acreage in Cambridge. So that's a small part of Harvard and nowhere near as beautiful. So let me just tell you a little bit about where we sit. Of course, all of you will know of the Emerald Necklace, which was designed and created as one of the great park systems in Boston, in the country, in Boston in the 1880s and the 1890s and so forth. And it essentially encircles from the back fens all the way to the terminal, which is the Franklin Park down here. And I'm not sure if the batteries have died, but the Arnold Arboretum is on the upper left. So how were we born? Well, it's an interesting story. In 1842, the landowner, the land was old agricultural land that had been, basically you had animals on it, you had some on it, and it was pretty played out by the early 1800s. And a man named Benjamin Bussey and his family had this set of land holdings. He was a gentleman farmer. It was not how he was making his living. When he died, he bequeathed all of the land to Harvard University. It was just land, and so that meant that it just sat there. But 30 years later, a whaling merchant in New Bedford, who was not associated with Harvard University, he died. His name was James Arnold, and he left his money for the creation of an institution around plants, growing plants. It could have been agricultural, it could have been applied agriculture, and one of his trustees was someone from Harvard, and they had the extraordinarily wonderful idea to bring money to partner with this land to create an outdoor museum of trees that would demonstrate trees for anyone who wanted to come. And so in 1872, the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University was born. And the first director was appointed and took up his term in 1873. That was Charles Sprague Sargent. You see Sargent's name in a lot of different places in this area. To give you some idea of how much turnover there is, I'm the 8th director of the Arnold Arboretum. So there are only 6 people between me and Charles Sprague Sargent. Well, Sargent was a man of extraordinary ambition and appetite in the sense of what he wanted to create. And he turned then to the preeminent landscape designer, perhaps in American history, but certainly of the period, and that was Frederick Law Olmsted. And he asked Frederick Law Olmsted to partner with the Arnold Arboretum to create a plan to actually make an extraordinary and eminent landscape. And this is actually, you can see F.L. Olmsted down here. This is one of the old, you can see proposition to be a public ground to include the Harvard Arboretum. Already you're seeing something about our value system. Olmsted was the person, of course, who created Central Park, but he was a great believer in democracy and democratizing values and access. And so even though this was going to be a research institution, this was going to be a place where a university did stuff, it was going to be a public ground. Thank you. And this public ground, a mouse no less, this public ground was going to be something that would be open to everybody forever. And if you ask what cultural institution can you go to in Boston any day of the year for free, the answer is there's one. And that's the Arnold Arboretum. So we are accessible to anyone, everyone. No, means are not the arbiter of who comes in our door. It's not the free thing. This is every single day, and I have met people from generations in various projects whose lives were changed because that's what their family could afford, but it was a great cultural experience and they were welcomed. So this is the Arnold Arboretum. It's born in 1872. But really it's 1882 when this partnership really gets underway. The problem with Olmsted's plans were they were so grand, what he and Sargent wanted, there was no way Harvard could afford it. And so Olmsted, Sargent, they came up with an extraordinary idea, something that only happened once in Harvard's history. And that is they convinced Harvard to give something in terms of monetary value away. It doesn't usually work that way for any of you who are Harvard alums. You will know they're very happy to see it come. And what they convinced Harvard to do was to donate the land free to the city of Boston forever. And we would take a lease back, and in so doing, the city of Boston would actually create and pave all the roads, blast out the rock, build all the stone walls, maintain the hardscape, do law enforcement, and forever Harvard would actually control the property, take care of the trees, teach, do research, and that would be this wonderful public sort of private hybrid institution. And that's exactly what happened. We have a 1,000-year lease, renewable once. I have a check that's sent every year to the city of Boston for our lease, which is $1. And it's an amazing thing. But we can never charge for anyone to come in, and that's also a wonderful thing. We are truly a public park. So when you go to the Arnold Arboretum and you look around at all those trucks, those are all Harvard trucks. I tell people, the business school faculty, the law school faculty think they're great stuff. Who has the biggest fleet of trucks on the faculty at Harvard? Me. All right? Those are just a fraction of what I have driving around on the property. And the incredible arborists and horticulturists that take care, these are all Harvard employees. All 70 people who work at the Arboretum are Harvard employees, and they are some of the most gifted, talented horticulturists and arborists in the world. To get one of these jobs, they turn over, people stay for 30, 40 years, is to literally win the ticket to the ultimate job in horticulture. It is an extraordinary thing, and they are an amazing group of people. And then you'll see Boston Parks comes and patrols when the city's walls, I phone when they fall down, and actually pavement, things like that. And we worked with the Commissioner of Parks, a very, very good person who's very supportive. But the fact of the matter is, and this is something I want everyone to understand about the Arnold Arboretum, it's part of Harvard University. We receive no direct funding from Harvard. Harvard, as you may know, is every tub on its own bottom. That means we are a philanthropic enterprise within Harvard that rests on our endowment, our membership, and gifts. Everyone here has a brochure about membership. Honest to goodness, there is no other source of funding. If you ask, well, what, doesn't the city send you money to run a park? The answer is no. You're Harvard. Why would we send you money? And in reality, the city parks, in a general sense, many of them have far greater than does the Arnold Arboretum. So we don't ask for money. But what I can tell you is 100% of our budget, from our Head Start programs for inner city youth to the adult education programs that hopefully many of you will take, are all funded by philanthropy. There is no other source of funding. So if anything, I hope you'll leave tonight. If you're not a member, it matters. Plus, there are a lot of benefits that come from our lecture series and a variety of other things. So anyway, it's Harvard, every tub on its own bottom, and Boston says, hey, you've got enough money. But that's how it works, and in many ways, that's just fine. So please consider becoming a member. It matters a great deal to us, and philanthropy is the only way that we actually pay our budgets. So brief facts: 281 acres, bigger than the Cambridge campus. We're now just over 16,000 curated woody plant accessions. I'll tell you what that means a little bit more specifically. Roughly 2,100 species on the grounds. That's about 10 times the woody plant biodiversity of Massachusetts. I mean, that's a lot of woody species. An herbarium of pressed plants from around the world, from collecting of about 1.3, maybe 1.4 million specimens. We have archives that go back over a century and a quarter of our exploration of Asia. These are photographic archives that record cultural history. They're all online. They're shared around the world. I'll be going to Tokyo, where the Natural History Museum there will have a special exhibit about the Arnold Arboretum in Tokyo in Japan 100 years ago. Our images are shown around the world. Now, believe it or not, as you may know, when you go there, every tree has a tag. Bit of work to keep 16,000 tags in place. Dogs pull them off, wind blows them off, but we do. But you can actually go to this program called Arboretum Explore. Just Google it on your phone or on your computer. It will bring up all 16,000 records and allow you to do the most sophisticated searching for plants that you will find at any botanic garden in the world. We have a whole floor of plant records people, curators, technology specialists, people who do GIS, Geographic Information Services. If you touch that button right there on your phone, it will pull up the plant record. If you're standing there, it's going to tell you what you're next to. And it'll tell you where the plant came from, what year, everything. So that whole top floor of the Honeywell building, which is our visitor center, is just filled with people who are behind the scenes creating an extremely sophisticated technology to track our plants. And this is what you would see on your computer. If you wanted to look at the Oyama magnolia, you'd type it in. It would tell you how many we have. You click on it. It's going to bring up pictures. All of this is at your fingertips. Our goal every day is to share everything we have, whether it's on the grounds or electronically around the world. So now the thing I want to explain about the Arnold Arboretum, which I think really makes it a special place, is the word provenance. I think it's a word that a lot of people associate with art museums. You go and you see a painting on the wall and you think about the provenance of that thing. You don't hear people say provenance at a botanical garden. But a botanical garden like the Arnold Arboretum is a museum. Our objects are living objects, and they are like any other museum object in that we are charged with knowing where it came from, what it's done its whole life, what has happened to it. In a painting, it might be that it needs cleaning. It might be plant disease and what we've had to do to prune it out. But our objects are not interchangeable. Each specimen is, like you and me, an individual organism with its own history. So I just took a picture of a sand pear on top of Bussey Hill. I love sand pears. It's not, you can go to a nursery and buy a sand pear and you can put it in your backyard. And if you took a picture of its flowers, it would look a lot like this. But it wouldn't be this organism. the bottom of that tree, the tag will tell you that Pyrus pirifolia was collected in 1908. It was collected in China by Ernest Henry Wilson, one of our great, most eminent Asian collectors who was English, and we hired to come over here. What I can tell you about this plant is he was with his Chinese collecting team when he came across a tree that had fruit, and that seed was collected. It went across an ocean, a continent. It went into our plant propagation facilities. Someone coaxed the right medium and got it to germinate. Someone then grew it up to size over about 3 or 4 or 5 years till it was about this tall. Someone then made a decision that it was going to go in a hole that someone dug, probably put some good soil in on top of Bussey Hill, and that probably happened about 1911 or 12. I don't have the record on it. And we've been taking care of that plant ever since. That's not the plant in your backyard. It's not the plant at Home Depot. That's a plant with a voyage and a journey. That's provenance. And that's what makes the Arnold Arboretum truly a museum. Here's Ernest Henry Wilson. That's a picture of him in Korea. This is also Japan. This is northern Sichuan, where I've actually been where he's collected there. This is also some islands off of the coast of Japan. He spent many years in China, also Japan and Korea. He traveled the world. He was considered one of the greatest early 20th century collectors in Asia, but he was one of a stable of collectors we had. The Arnold Arboretum was covering the world. Purdom, who worked in the Tibetan Plateau, Meyer, all of these people were circling the globe to collect the rarest of the rare, things that had never been seen before in the West, bringing them to the Arnold Arboretum, putting them through all of that work to put them in a hole so that you and I could enjoy them a century later. It's an amazing sense of generosity, of paying something forward. Now, when I got to the Arnold Arboretum in 2011, we had sort of stepped away from what I would call the great age of exploration. And it was my job, I felt, to really get us back into that game. Good museums, art museums, if you think about it, imagine an art museum that stopped collecting, that stopped wanting more art, better art, different strengths in its collections. You'd see a strange museum. Same with the botanical garden. We have great material. That doesn't mean we have everything. It doesn't mean our values haven't changed, that we don't have material, that there may be something that's threatened and endangered and we don't have it. We need to get it into safe harbor. So I appointed a group of people from around North America, scholars from within the gardens world and academics, to advise us to create a document, you can read this online, that says, what are our values? What do we want to do? It might be genomics. It might be climate change research. It might be evolutionary biology. It might be conservation biology, all of these things. And of course, just pure horticultural display. And we said, these are what we need to do well. And now we're going to reverse engineer and find out what plants we need to get us there. And at the end of that list are about 400 different species of plants. Some of them we already have, but we may not have different provenance. So for example, we might want to have 2 individuals from different parts of a geographic range. One might be on its verge of extinction. Even if the species is safe, that population is about to go away. Or it may be that we have a placeholder that we did get from a nursery, but now we've gone to China. We can have something that has wild collected roots. We can know where it's from, and we send someone for it. And this is what it looks like in terms of our collecting. We launch 4 to 6 major expeditions a year. We're now the most active garden in the world collecting in the wild. You may not realize it, but we are launching teams everywhere. Most of it's heading to Asia. China, if Europe is a sort of a depauperate place when it comes to plant diversity and woody plant diversity, and North America is much more diverse in sort of number of species per unit of area, China is even more. I mean, that's why we head to China. There's just that much more. Great diversity, amazing range. It just has had a different evolutionary history. But we're in Europe, and we're certainly collecting in North America, in the Ozarks, Pacific Northwest. I've reached unique agreements that allow us access that no one else has. This is an agreement to get us into northern Sichuan. That means we can collect anything with our Chinese colleagues. We always have, and we always continue to work as partners. We do not go in alone. We have the best friends in the world in each country. We go, they host us, we work together, they come and they visit with us here. And we also are going on expeditions with them here in the US so that they can bring back our biodiversity to share with their home countries. So it's always a partnership. It's never, and it has never been one of exploitation. this is where we collect. That's the Huanglong Nature Reserve in northern Sichuan outside of Songpan, about 2 miles up. Those are these beautiful mineral pools with calcium. It's the most beautiful national park I have ever been in my life. And if you get a chance to go, go. It's extraordinary. But we send young people. This is part of what we want to do. We want to train more and more people to be collectors, to be able to do bioinventories, to make sure we're not losing things. So we get young people through, we have endowments. We've been given money to get young people to go out and learn from us how to collect, and then they actually can take these skills. This is an expedition to Tennessee, getting the big leaf magnolia. Obviously, there's a wonderful article that was about our expedition 2 years ago in China, which is what is referred to as the mother of gardens. And here, just let me show you China 2017. This is Kong Wong from Beijing Botanic Garden, a wonderful colleague. We've been collecting with him for years. Michael Dosman, the keeper of the living collections, and that's Andrew Kopinski, the manager of horticulture. And they're standing in front of a tree, and you'll notice they're doing this, right? And you'll notice from my archives that I have this picture, which is from, I think, about 1911. And you'll notice 3 men standing in front of a tree like that. So now, what if I told you it's the same tree? It is. So when I say we have provenance, not only do we bring seeds back, but if we can record, we will record what the mother tree is. And we can come back 100 years later and find that tree. That's what you're seeing, even if you're unaware of it. When you're in the Arnold Arboretum, everything you're walking by has history. It changes everything. It's not the same as just walking by any tree. Our collections are remarkable, and actually the Plant Collections Network has what are called national collections. We have 8 of them. These are then certified by the USDA and the Forest Service and by the American Public Gardens Association to be the finest collections of their kind in the country. Our maple collection, I can tell you, is unparalleled. You know sugar maples, silver maples, things like that. We have almost 70 species of maple in the Arnold Arboretum, 70. That means if you go to our maple collection, we're laid out taxonomically. You can walk into that collection. You will not find another place on the planet Earth where you could walk from tree to tree, compare the leaf shapes, the bark, the flowers of 70 species of maple. And we've got the Stewartia collection and hemlock collection. The Forsythia was just certified this last year. And even though ginkgo is only a single species, we have the most wild collected natural ginkgo material in the world from our expeditions to China. And many of these are relictual populations that are probably threatened. So we actually keep the genetics in safe harbor right at the Arnold Arboretum. We pay a lot of attention to collecting plants that are vulnerable to extinction because of human activities. Franklinia, the Franklin tree, many of you may know in the tea family, is extinct in the wild. It went extinct somewhere in the early 1800s. The 2 oldest specimens on the planet are on top of Bussey Hill. They're over a century old. Viburnums, all kinds of things. About 7% of our material is threatened. Now, that's at the species level. If you ask at the population level, with climate change and with things migrating, it's about double that. We have material from things, parts of species ranges that will simply disappear from the face of this earth. So you're walking by literally a genetics sort of bank. There forever, hopefully, if we take good care of plants. Now, for a long time, there wasn't much research at the Arnold Arboretum, and that's a very strange thing because you have to ask, why would a university have a botanical garden if it wasn't to promote scholarship, to be able to do research, to be able to teach students? It seems like an odd business for the university to get into. Well, originally, the Arnold Arboretum had a major research facility. There was a College of Applied Biology at Harvard called the Bussey Institution, which was right next to the Arboretum. But Harvard had a tendency to centralize things over the years, and by the 50s, almost everything had been brought out of the Arnold Arboretum and centralized to Cambridge. But when I arrived, my predecessors had made the incredibly important case that the Arnold Arboretum needed to be part of Harvard in every way. And I opened up a magnificent new research building in 2011, 45,000 square feet, state-of-the-art, and it's now filled with scientists, not only from Harvard, but from all the universities in Boston and from universities around the world, coming to work on our plants. And so, amazingly, that beautiful building right there, my graduate students can be out in the collections, and 5 minutes later they can be on a microscope, or they can be doing pollination bagging experiments to exclude pollinators, or they can be extracting DNA, and that all happens now. And as a consequence, things are happening in terms of science at the Arnold Arboretum. It's not just quaint science, it's genomics, it's everything you can imagine, including climate change research. We have a team flying a drone over the entire 200 and whatever acres of the Arnold Arboretum. This drone flies every week. It picks up images as three-dimensional clusters of color. You can see crab apples in flower here. There's a drone flying over. These are massive data sets. I mean, computers choke on this stuff. You can then take the color signature and you can start to pick up when chlorophyll flows in the leaves, when chlorophyll is withdrawn. You can start to look at when the sort of developmental timing events. And because we map every tree to the decimeter, we can overlay that on 10,000 specimens in a common garden and study the phenology or the annual events of these plants. So these are the maps of the Arnold Arboretum from May 20th through December 4th. It greens up, you can see. But we can actually do very, very specific analysis to ask important questions about how different species of trees are going to respond to different climates. That's happening every day now. We have people showing up doing these kinds of things. I had to work with a team. How many species of bacteria actually live on a ginkgo tree? Well, you can amplify all the DNA up, and the answer is that about 2,000 species of bacteria live quite happily with the ginkgo tree on its surface in little communities that actually is sort of north versus south side, old versus young limb, leaves, all these things. It's its own ecosystem. But these are things we couldn't have even asked a few years ago. I'm one of 3 professors based there. Another one works on climate change. Robin Hopkins works on the evolution of floral coloration. Our teams of graduate students are there, our postdoctorals, the visiting sabbatical people, all kinds of things. But Harvard's and the Boston area are really just about maybe 15% of our science. We are inviting people from all over the world to use this garden to do plant biology and environmental research. In 2018, we had 76 different research projects from around the world on the grounds. It's crawling with scientists everywhere. And we roll them out into our public science programs. So one of the great things about having people show up is we say, why don't you do a program? And they do. We have Harvard classes now come out to the Arboretum. I teach a class that comes out every week and meets with me at the Arboretum. I teach another class in the Graduate School of Design that meets at the Arboretum. It's part of the campus system. And we have special classes that we have funding for from grants to bring students from around the world to really get an intimate knowledge of how plants work. Conferences show up on genomes, on climate change, you name it. So as part of Harvard University, if I can leave you with anything, we are back in the business of being a really important part of Harvard University's mandate, to educate, to ask questions, to find answers, and to expand the knowledge of the world around us. But again, we are a public garden, and even though I'm actually running a public park for the city of Boston, I have no official relationship with the city of Boston, I and every one of my colleagues at the Arboretum view our role in the public domain as sacrosanct. It is important, especially in an age where disparity is getting worse, where there are fewer opportunities for those with less. We think hard every day about how we are going to make the Arnold Arboretum an agent of social good. So this involves everything from citizen science programs that feed into networks that pick up information about what's called the Tree Spotters program, which picks up when trees break bud, when they flower. There's a national network that's tracking what the effects of climate change are. This is all adults, but this may be many retired people who have the time to spend, who actually then create a sense of community and a sense of camaraderie, as well as a sense of having done something that day when you come that matters in the world. It's also, and this is feeding into the National Phenology Network, also put our scientists out in something called tree mobs. In the evening for half an hour, scientists by a tree, and it's very spontaneous. We blast it out a couple of days before and we say, come here, Ned Friedman, talk about catalpa trees. And I may not tell you about the flowers, I might talk to you about extrafloral nectaries. You may ask what they are, and then we'll have a discussion. Or it might be someone like Peter Del Tredici talking about ginkgo trees. We have a public series called the Director's Lecture Series. I bring eminent people in the winter, Naomi Oreskes, Richard Holmes. This Monday, I have, how many of you have read Overstory? Okay. Well, anyway, we have Rick Powers coming, and he's actually going to be partnered up with Robin Wall-Kimmerer, and I will be having a conversation with them. Gina McCarthy, the former head of EPA, is going to be here at the Arboretum for an evening talk, I think, in about a month. So we have some pretty extraordinary people that come through town. But what I want to also tell you, and I'll tell you about the children's programs in a minute, but here's the deal. I have this wonderful new lab right here. That's our historic building at the other end. This is where I live, on Whitcomb Avenue, 2 blocks. This is my backyard. And I spend a lot of time just walking in the Arnold Arboretum. I have a camera I bring with me, just a little point and shoot, and I've been doing this for about 5 years, and I have been doing a lot of walking. And if you look at our 15,000 dots there, you will find that roughly almost 2,000 of those dots have been personally met with by me, and I have photographed that tree. I have a long ways to go. I will not live long enough to get all 16,000. But I am working at it, and it's a really wonderful thing. It helps me reflect on the plants. A lot of people jog through, that's fine. But plants can change how you feel. They can change your mood. Landscape, especially an Olmsted landscape that's pristine, affects you if you let it, if you just take the time. And so I've been taking a lot of pictures. Every one of my images is online. You can see these images. There are about 20,000. I've taken about 8,000. If you search for witch hazel in our little plant image database, that's what you'll pull up, is a bunch of my pictures. All right. Now, even better, and here you are in Wellesley, and you may know public school teachers, private school teachers. Plant blindness is a huge challenge. People don't teach about plants. Often they don't know a lot about plants. Then kids come out of high school, they don't know anything about plants. If you go to a picture at the Arnold Arboretum's website, and our plant image site, and you say, I really like that picture, there's a button right there that says Export to PowerPoint. And it will literally, when you touch it, it will drop that image right onto your desktop, and you can drag and drop that PowerPoint slide right into your presentation. So every public and private school teacher should be using our images. They're free to be used. There's nothing other than commercial use that we prohibit. And this is how you get kids to look at things. And so this is as easy as pushing a button and dragging it. It has all the accession information. It's that simple. So it's a very powerful thing. I don't think there's any other garden in the world that has something like this that they're serving up. As a consequence, I do a lot of sort of trying to share and lure people there. I'm very pleased that everyone's been there this year. You haven't been there this week, but if you'd gotten my little posts from the collections, maybe you'd have come. So what I'm going to tell you is that every 3 or 4 weeks, I send an email out with 3 pictures and 3 paragraphs. And we're going to send some clipboards around. If you'd like to get them, it's every 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to get a short email saying, come. This is what's happening now. Here's where it's happening. Here's what you can see. It will make your day. So it might be the willows right now. They're in flower, those beautiful willows along Willow Path. It might have been something interesting under the beech trees that I'll tell you about in a little bit. But I don't go out with a plan. I just wander. And then something confronts me, and it might be the oaks in snow. It might be witch hazels in bloom in the winter. It might be Osage orange fruits on the ground. I can't predict what's going to happen, but I will share that with you. And if you come, then I feel very sort of happy because I've allowed you now in on a little secret that you might not know about otherwise. So what I'm going to do, rather than just go on about a lot of the details of the Arnold Arboretum, is I want to sort of pivot to Goethe. One of my most favorite poems in the world is this poem he wrote, which is really a reflection on nature. And as an evolutionary biologist, I tend to think in the hundreds of millions of years. There's a sense of deep time that I think about all the time. And when people think of trees, you tend to think, well, if I don't get to the Arboretum today, it's a tree. It'll be there next year. But nature is really made up of infinite numbers of ephemeral moments, just as our own lives are. There is no, I'll come back next year and see you. Each of our lives, each day is split into ephemera. And I think Goethe, in a biological sense, captured it, joyfully deliberating, striving in the years long past to understand how in creating nature lives. I saw it last ever, the one itself revealing as myriad ephemera, plurality the one concealing, governed each by inner law. Everlasting evanescent, inaccessible yet near, formed, transformed through change incessant, clothed in wonder, I am here. That poem guides me every time I walk on the grounds of the Arnold Arboretum, because it is about these ephemera. If I miss it today, I will have to wait a year. It is that ephemeral, and I'm going to show you. So I became sort of obsessed early on with just one single European beech tree. I love bud break in the spring. It's an incredibly joyous moment. To see what's inside of that wonderful bud is all of this year's leaves have already been made. They've been sitting there dormant. They will flush out in a matter of 2 or 3 days in this magnificent event. And so I went to this beech tree. It was one I loved particularly. And I loved it because of the reds, and it turns out there's a reason for this, and the delicate sort of plications you see in these tender young leaves that literally go from this big to this big in 48 hours. It's really quite remarkable. And they play out with these beautiful zigzag symmetry. Each one of these leaves is actually wrapped in a little red piece of ephemeral sort of biological tissue. It's basically sunscreen to make sure the delicate leaf doesn't get burned up. Every one of these will drop off. If you walk under a European beech in the spring, you will see hundreds of thousands of small, inch-long pieces of red. Everyone listed, it worked for 3 days to protect a young leaf, and then it fell away. That's magic. And you just start to appreciate how delicate and how wonderful this moment is, and you realize, no, I can't. It isn't a next week for that tree. That tree will live a long time. That moment comes once a year, and it might not be sunny next year. You've got to seize that moment. And this tree just, in many ways, it sort of turned my fascination with just wanting to be there every year. And so I followed it through the year, and I came back in the fall, of course, and there I was. It was beautiful, almost like stained glass in a cathedral. The light was just right that year, and all of a sudden, I'm looking through panes of glass. But I'll tell you about this tree. Again, it's not any European beech. It's this European beech. Now, a European beech is supposed to grow up tall, 100 and something feet, but this one is called the tortuosa European beech. It's a natural genetic mutant from the wild. It curls and it turns into a hemisphere, but it never grows up. That tree came to the Arnold Arboretum from Kew in 1888, who got it from the wild in France before that. And it's been growing in that spot since 1888. And this is what it looks like in the fall. And this is what it means to stand under it and look up. And again, peak color on this, 48 hours max. And really, you're missing it if you're not there every day. All right, so I went back to this tree, and I'll just tell you, I love this tree, and I went back on August 21st, 2017. Why did I go back to this tree on that date? Well, it was a really important day. And it turns out I'd read something that Aristotle had written in his Problematica. He told me, not personally, but through the ages, that if you stand under a tree during a solar eclipse, you will see an outline of the eclipse on the ground. Now, how many of you went out on that date with a cereal box and a pinhole? Well, that was a mistake. Okay. Next time, go under a tree, because the leaves, as they flutter, create thousands of pinhole cameras. And Aristotle knew it, and I read that, and this is what that one beech tree looked like. Those are the crescents of the sun with the moon carved out, rotating through under a European tortuosa beech that came from Kew, that came from France in 1888. That's pretty good. So that's what one tree can do, and I have 16,000 of them, all right? This is a great tree. There are a lot more great trees. So what I'm going to do is I want to sort of give you a little, a lot of people say, why would I come to the Arnold Arboretum in the winter? And of course, the answer is because it's extraordinarily beautiful to see trees without leaves, without flowers, to see the architecture, the starkness of form against the sky, and also winter bark. And I'm just going to show you winter bark at its peak. The colors tend to be, because of the sun and the intensity, at their peak in the winter. So here's one of our wonderful, these are the stripy maples that have the striped bark with the white waxes and, of course, the ridging. But here's a close relative that has basically yellow-green bark, and another relative of these snakebark maples that has literally, it's pinkish orange in the winter. And I mean, I have done nothing to enhance these photographs. This is just a little point and shoot. They are magnificent trees. So you get textures. Look at this beautiful paperbark maple, almost with muscle-like striations that are twisting around the tree with the shadows on the low sun throwing some relief. Or this very same paperbark maple, as the paper bark pulls away, they turn into basically glowing panes of bark. The Chinese call this tree something with reference to blood red, because it has that intense color. But then you can go and see the whites of some of our incredible birches in our birch collection with their beautiful, what we call lenticels, these little stripes where the actual gas exchange occurs, or something almost a pure cream, like this beautiful Betula pubescens. And then many of you will know the wonderful shrub-like dogwoods that have the reds and the greens over by our ponds. They are an intense red. Or the puzzle-shaped pieces of a Cornus cusa, the cusa dogwood, as the bark peels and these little interdigitating pieces. Or you might go over to our Stewardias and look at the beautiful texture, almost reptilian, I'd say. Magnificent. Or the tans and the beiges of another Stewardia, the Pseudocamellia. Or one of our elm relatives. In January, as it pops off old segments of bark that exfoliate out on the ground, everything underneath is as orange as the orange you could eat at a store. It's a strange sight. It's waiting for you if you go in January. It will not be orange in June. So these are the kinds of things that I think are just so wonderful about winter. And going off, my favorite pine tree, which has reds, silvers, greens, Pinus bungiana, the lace bark pine from China. There's no pine like it with that bark. It's unforgettable. Little pieces there. This is another Pinus bungiana with silver and green. Here's a London plane tree. Just a little puzzle piece. And the great ripples out from an old branch in one of our fir trees right there. And the beautiful paper-like thing of the Chinese hazelnut or Corylus fargesii. So that's just to give you a sense of, again, you can go now, you do not need to see flowers, you do not need to see leaves, and on a nice sunny day with a crisp blue sky, it's dramatic. And then you look up and you see the architecture and you have that bonus. It's a great time to be at the Arboretum. Now I'm going to tell you what you can come and see early in the spring, and this is something that has to do with cones, not flowers, but pine cones and so forth. Most of you will think that pine cones look like this. They do. They're brown. They're very woody. The Torrey pine from San Diego seems like an unlikely pine, most endangered pine species in North America, lives on the ocean just outside of San Diego. We have a specimen growing at the Arnold Arboretum on Bussey Hill. Amazing. There's a reason. It got pushed south in the last glaciation, which wasn't that long ago, 18,000 years ago, and it never came back north, but it still can take the cold. Isn't that amazing? Beautiful. I've been to the Torrey pines, and they're amazing. Here's another one, the Table Mountain pine. Very beautiful things. Here's one of my favorite pines, Pinus armandii, the Chinese white pine. This is when it's green, and then it opens up and releases its seeds. How much time between those two pictures? 5 days. 5 days. So when you think plants are slow, you're making an assumption. They are fast. What's happening is moving at the speed that you yourself may not ever fully appreciate. That's 5 days.
Wow.
Now, you've looked at conifers, you know a cone maybe you can identify all the different kinds of spruces, firs, all of those kinds of things. But how many of you have ever seen a pine cone in April? When it's being born. What color do you think it is? No. It's the most dramatic color that you could imagine. It's red, it's purple. You've been walking by these for your entire lives. I guarantee you they're here in Wellesley. They're anywhere you go. If you've walked by trees, you've been walking by this, you just didn't see it. This is what my posts are all about. I send out pictures. The pines. That's just a pine tree with a young cone. The little yellow dots are, in fact, that's the Japanese red pine, are the pollen grains, and you can see the needles that are bursting out. Conjure up a Douglas fir tree, you should think magenta pink. That's the Douglas fir cone, the seed cone when it emerges in the spring. And if you wait just a few weeks, it's gone. It's only red for a matter of a few days at peak. It then subsides to green and then ultimately to brown. I love larches. They're the first cones to flush long before other things are in flower. This is just a standard larch tree, and you can see here the European larch. That magnificent cone, it's about this big. But it's got waxes on the back that are white and this beautiful red color. One day I turned around and I was taking a picture this way. What was behind me? An entire chain of cones hanging down right in my face level. So here they are. Here's the Iberian larch in the spring. Here is the Dunkeld hybrid larch coming up. Look at these. And again, against the blue sky, could not be more beautiful. Here's one of our hybrid larches, just magnificent colors, looking straight down on the top with the beautiful spirals. But if you wait a few weeks, that's what you get. It's nice enough. I don't have a problem with green and brown. Here we've got a beautiful spruce, and you can see the picea. The needles are flushing, but look at those reds there. Here's another one of my favorites. It's actually like a rainbow sherbet. It goes from yellow to pink to almost a magenta. It's an amazing thing to see, but it's only at its peak for a matter of days. And these are all in our conifer collection, one of the most eminent conifer collections in the world. So you wait a few days, the color goes away. It's not there, and before you know it, it's brown. So that's actually going to happen in April and May. And you can go on our website, and again, you can put in some of these things. And because the pictures show up with the dates, it'll tell you when it's happening last year or the year before. You can actually make predictions about when you should go. But I often send something out. So I just want to finish by really saying that as much as I want you to know about what we do in the research world of, whether it's climate change, whether we're educating college students, we are, again, an agent of social good, and we are this great landscape. And so I hope you will start to make this a more regular part of your life. The fall and the beaches is magnificent. I love a blizzard as much as about anyone. And since I live 2 blocks away, I can walk right in. When Boston shut down, I can be there. And it is dramatic to be there. And because we plow everything, it's the only place in Boston I can guarantee you that will have no snow accumulations on our roads. Our crews come in overnight if they have to make sure that even if there's 3 feet of snow coming, every road in the Arboretum will be plowed, and you may walk in it without any concerns. So that's a good time for us to be there. So this is what it looks like the next day. Blue skies, a little Olmstedian peek into our conifer collection, and then good time spent under my Tortuosa beech in the winters without leaves. The crab apples in the spring on Peters Hill. One of the most eminent crabapple collections, flowering crabapple collections in the world. Lilac Sunday, we now have about 40 to 50,000 people. If you don't like crowds, come Saturday. If you enjoy seeing all of Boston with their families, their grandparents, their children, it's also a joyous occasion because we open the place up and we do tours and we want everyone there. And it is an important place to go with your friends, with your family. It will change your day. It will change many things about your life if you make it a regular part of your life. And we are constantly thinking, we talk to people, we work with groups that are trying to rethink. We do not define the Arboretum for you. Our job is to find out how we can reopen the Arboretum to many different kinds of experiences from many different kinds of people. And I will tell you, we're very heavily involved with the city of Boston right now with a big project that will involve greater access into some of the neighborhoods around the Arboretum. A long time ago, 50 years ago, the neighborhoods around the Arboretum were pretty rough stuff, and it wasn't a safe place. They have all, as Boston has pushed out from center, become extremely expensive parts of Boston. That's good in some ways. There are fewer problems, but we do have a set of neighborhoods which have some of the most significant economic disparities in all of Boston, with public housing projects, with children who live in families with $20,000 or less per year annual income, And those kids need us, and we need them to make sure that we are understanding our role. And there's going to be a new path system along the side of Peters Hill that will go all the way into Roslindale to draw people in on foot and into these neighborhoods. It's a big $6 million project. Part of the funding hopefully is in place at the state level to make this happen. But when we get these paths done, we hope that we can literally get people right in our door. This is a challenge. Parks have a great challenge in getting people of diversity, especially people who are already challenged with 3 jobs and with access to information. So we are now looking very hard at how we redouble our efforts to make sure that we are part of justice in the city of Boston. And finally, I'll just mention, we're involved in something huge. The largest solar installation in Harvard's history is going up right now by our research building, not in the Arboretum proper. It will actually be 1,300 panels. We borrow the money from Harvard. It has a green loan program. It'll take us forever to pay it off, unless when you get our little thing, you can buy a panel for $1,000 and sponsor one. So if you all want to buy a panel, you'll be doing a great thing. And then we pay the money back sooner. But we have to lower our footprint, and we have to do it. And this is just looking out the window yesterday. The racking systems are going up, and we will increase Harvard's solar load by 1/3 when this goes up. And as part of Boston's 2050 carbon neutral and Harvard's 2050 carbon neutral, we will be a major contributor to that. With battery backup to decrease peak usage, which means get the old coal-fired plants off. So if you believe in doing something right in your own backyard, the Arnold Arboretum is doing that. And this is a very, very wonderful thing. And it all matters because we're here to serve you, and we're here to make everyone's life a little bit richer, whether it's a Head Start children or just a family that's come on a beautiful day and done cartwheels. To me, when I walk the grounds, the best part of my job is to see that other people are happy. So I'll stop there. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of things beforehand. The Wellesley Council on Aging is planning a tour of the Arnold Arboretum this summer. We have an interest list over there. Please add your name, and a COA staff member will be in touch. We are also conducting a survey, so I hope all of you have been to the new Tolles Parsons Center. We're looking to see what kind of extended hours we may want to do, whether it's evening, weekends, and a survey did go out in the mail. If you have not filled it out, you can fill one out over there. So we're going to do a Q&A, but I usually don't do this, but I'm going to start with 2 questions. Usually I don't start with any. First one, and I'll give them both. How did you get into this field? Mm-hmm. And then the second one is, when you're taking plants from another environment, I'm going to use all the wrong scientific words.
Okay.
How do you know that how do you make it work if the climate culture is so different?
Okay, those are both actually good questions. So how did I end up becoming the director of the Arnold Arboretum, I think is the kind of question. So I have no idea. I'm a professor and was quietly minding my own business.
But how did you start even getting interested in this?
I got a call from Harvard saying, would I look at it? And I said, oh, in the field of botany. Oh, in college, thanks. I couldn't tell you. My parents were not natural historians or biologists. I just like biology. And like most high school students, you got a lot of animal, and you got one lecture on photosynthesis. And then I went off to college. I went to Oberlin College, and I took a botany class, and it changed my life. I had known I liked biology, but I didn't know how. I just discovered it. I didn't make a decision. As I tell my students, no one chooses a career. If you're lucky, you will discover what you should just be doing. And I knew I was deeply affected by being around plants and thinking about them. And so I did research in college. I went off to graduate school at Berkeley, and I love teaching. And so I did a year of postdoctoral at Arizona. I was a professor at University of Georgia in my early career, which was fantastic, one of the great places for plant biology, and then spent the middle of my career at University of Colorado in Boulder, and then moved here. But I certainly did not expect to be directing a botanical garden or having administration. I had never done any of that stuff before.
Do you like it?
I wouldn't trade it for the world. So.
Bringing plant seeds back.
So how about bringing plant seeds back? Well, there's two aspects to that question which might be of interest. So when we go to China, do we just like shove plants in our pockets and come back? And the answer is no. So up until the 1920s, we did. You could bring plants back with soils and anything else you wanted. And if you think about what's happened with diseases, that pathogens, think of where the chestnuts are and the elms and all these other wonderful plants that are gone. So in the 20s, the USDA banned the importation of plants with soil. So everything would have to be brought back from that point on as seed. It has to be cleaned. We have permits from the USDA. There are USDA inspection stations, and it works quite well. So when we're in China, at the end of a 12 or 14-hour day, you're in your hotel room, you're cleaning all of the fruits off, you've got to get all the fleshy stuff off, they've got to be clean seed, they go into glassine plastic envelopes with a certain number, they're labeled, they know exactly what it is, the inspector can see it, they get sent from wherever we are in the wild out to Beijing, Beijing to Jamaica near New York, which is next to the Kennedy Airport where there's a USDA facility. Everything gets inspected. We can be in the field, and that set of seeds can be in our greenhouses in a week and a half. It's a pretty effective thing. Don't always get everything through. There's certain seeds that are likely to carry things that need to be fumigated to kill the pests. Like oaks are very hard. Inevitably, when they fumigate to kill what's in they also usually kill the oaks. But occasionally you get lucky and one or two of them survive, and then you get a plant. So we get all of our material. Very straightforward and very nicely and well-regulated thing. We only can collect where we have permission, so you have to have permits from your hosts. If we're in the U.S., you might be on parkland from the state of Arkansas. If you're in the we work with the U.S. Forest Service, all that kind of stuff. Now, the different aspect of it is how in the world would anyone think that I could go to the Ozarks, kind of far south of here, and bring plants back that might have different soils that they've evolved on. They're not used to really cold weather. They're used to much more intense summers. And the answer is we don't know until we grow them out. So every batch of seeds that comes to the Arboretum, we may germinate 80 of them. The really vigorous ones, they get sort of culled out. We may give a bunch of them away to other gardens. And then we put about 5 of them in trial beds. And of those 5, maybe 2 or 3 after are the ones that we think really like being outside and they've survived. And so through that process, we discover that because there's genetic variation, that some will do better here and some worse. But sometimes we lose them all, and we just go back and try again with a different population. But remember, even though climate change is happening right now at an astonishing and destructive level because of human beings, nothing in Earth's history has ever been static. 18,000 years ago, we would have been under a sheet of ice that's almost 2 miles thick. That's not very long ago. So when I say that the Torrey Pine was pushed back, it's just recent. So plants often don't live where they can live. They live where they got stuck. And a lot of stuff got stuck. A lot of things raced back up when the glaciers retreated, but not everything. So I don't necessarily have the way of outguessing nature, and so that's why we bring a lot of stuff back and we find out. Yeah.
Do you see your mission as also not only giving a sanctuary to endangered species, but to propagate species to replant in the wild? There's been a lot of habitat destruction in China in regard to bamboo, which is the staple diet of the panda bear. And since you have an exchange with Asia, I'm just wondering if you it's reciprocal and you offer to replant bamboo.
We don't grow a lot of bamboo. We have a little bit, but what I can tell you is that anyone in the world who wanted to have genetics repatriated they would have it. We would propagate it up and send it. I'll give you an interesting example. We have a lot of material from North Korea, not a ton, but from our early expeditions in the 19-teens. I think it's fair to say there's probably been a fair amount of environmental degradation in North Korea. Many of the things that we have might literally not exist in the wild. I've also, for example, we're about to sign a big agreement with the government of Korea to collect with them, both in North America and Korea. Not only have we offered up any of of the plant material that we have if they wanted it for let's say, for restoration ecology. But our archives, our images, are all freely shared with anyone in Korea, Japan, China. We don't charge for it. We will give you permission to use it in museums. There's been, in China, after the Cultural Revolution, you can imagine what was lost. Our photographers in the 19-teens were taking pictures not only of plants, but of people, of buildings, of cultural art, and actually whole buildings. There's a gatehouse, I don't remember the city now. Our image was used to reconstruct that town's gatehouse. That was a historic gatehouse. It was our image. And so the answer is absolutely. It's essential to us that we don't own anything. We steward, we take care of. There's nothing owned by Harvard. People can't own the product of evolution in a general sense, I will tell you. I'm adamantly opposed to that. We can take care of it if we're good people, and we can share it. So that's the answer. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Oh, I'll get to you in a second. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
When we take seeds or plants from China or any other country, do we have to actually pay money for that, or is it all free for them as well? That's the first question. The second question was that I think you referred to a building as the Honeywell building. I don't know if that's Hunnewell. We had Horatio Wallace Honeywell here.
Who do you think he palled around with? Charles Sprague Sargent. Yeah. And you've probably have you been to the Pinecones over by Wellesley College? Yeah. I know the family well. And when Sargent was getting the Arboretum going, who do you think was helping the patriarch of the Honeywell estate start his Pinecones? The Arnold Arboretum. Yeah, we know them well. Our interns visit, and it's a magnificent property. You can walk around from the lake. And so back to your first question, do we pay for material? No. And I will not agree to importation of any material that has restrictions. A lot of times countries will say you can have it, but you can't let anyone else have it. I won't sign an agreement. People will think, well, what if someone gets rich off of this stuff? There's all this worry. There's a lot of restrictive things. The fact is we've got to get stuff safe before it's gone. No one gets rich off of plant material. It's a myth. It just isn't going to happen. And no one owns the product of evolution. I know we have patents and all that kind of stuff, but the fact is we only will collect if we can collect and share with you, and you can share with us. So I have sometimes to lean into these things, but I think once people understand that it's an honest relationship on the best of intentions, and if someone was to discover, someone will say, what if you discovered a drug worth millions or billions? Well, we won't see any of it, but I would say if it saves hundreds of thousands of lives, we did a good thing. I'm not going to worry about the money. So, yes. Does every tree have seeds? The answer is all trees are seed plants, but not every tree makes seeds. And I'm going to give you an example. There are some species of plants that actually are what we call dioecious. That means under two roofs. And that means that one plant is only going to produce pollen, the other plant is only going to receive pollen and make seeds. And the best example, how many of you know the ginkgo tree? Yeah. All right. When was the last time you saw ginkgo seeds? Because every tree in every city across the world is planted by cuttings, clones, of trees that make the pollen, but not the seeds, which are eaten in China and Japan and are a great delicacy on the inside, but on the outside have butyric acid and smell like vomit. And in that species, only half of the trees make seeds. Now, at the Arnold Arboretum, we only grow from seeds, so 50-50 gender balance. So if you want to smell a really wretched smell, you come to the Arnold Arboretum, and it is overpowering to stand under a female ginkgo tree. But otherwise, most trees will, if they have both sexes, they're going to produce seeds.
My second question is that since you're working with the city of Boston, so we're here living in Wellesley. When we go there, parking is always a big headache.
Mm-hmm.
So, are there any plans?
No parking lots that I'm aware of. So the question is about parking at the Arnold Arboretum, but I can give you a tip. So most people come to the Arnold Arboretum, you do it, it's going to give you 125 Arbor Way, the Honeywell building, and you're parking along that Arbor Way, and you're thinking, well, the mirror's going to get wiped off, and I'm going to open the door, and someone's going to scream by, and you're you're going to die. So can I give you Bussey Street? The street between the two parts of the Arboretum, the Jamaica Plain side and the Roslindale side, is an entire street that cuts through. It's a very wide boulevard, and you have unlimited parking on both sides. It's a very safe place. There's sidewalks there. And so what you need to do is just look at Bussey Street, drive there. Much more relaxing to park there, and there are many good entrances. It'll also give you a different way of coming into the Arboretum, which might change your perspective. But we're certainly not going to be putting up any parking lots on the grounds, and there's no space. I mean, that's the thing. It used to be you had to bring your horse-drawn carriage. Now you got to park. So, yeah.
What about diseases in the trees?
It's a tremendous challenge. So I have advisory boards. We work with USDA. We work with a variety of universities and scholars in plant pathology. We have a team on our horticulturists involved with integrative pest management. We removed about a dozen of our most sort of grand beech trees last year. There's an invasive insect that brings a native fungus or vice versa. And these trees were getting old, so they have a little less resistance. They were dying, but they were so full of fungal pathogens that not only were the trees failing, but we had a disease load, just like sending your kid off to a school room with no one's been inoculated. You're just surrounded by disease. So we have those craned out. People were shocked to see our beech collection, the tall stuff. But you have to make these decisions. When emerald ash borer showed up the second week of my job, I had to deal with that. We were under quarantine from the USDA for 3 years. Every maple tree in the collection was spotted and checked with climbers. But diseases, and again, exotic diseases where you haven't co-evolved with your pathogens, are the real problem. So, if you've had a few 100,000 years to sort of duke it out with your local pathogens, you reach a little bit of an equilibrium. But when you have something come from Asia or Europe and it hits an American species, it's never seen that before, that's exactly what happened with chestnut blight and things like that. So there are some trees we inject. The emerald ash borer, you may know, hundreds of millions of trees are gone. Ash will be gone from our forest basically forever. The first thing we did is we dropped every tree that had low provenance value. It wasn't something important. We didn't need the genetics. And the rest are trunk injected to allow those genetics that we are trying to conserve from the wild to go on. And we'll just have to wait and see. Our woolly adelgid, I'll just quickly tell you, we started when the woolly adelgid started to knock out all the hemlock for us. We were treating with imidacloprid, which is the stuff you read about with bee declines. That's not sustainable, and we think hard about these things. We have switched over to oils, and in the meantime, we've gone collecting to these trees that have been in populations that were wiped out, and this tree stands. It's probably got natural genetic resistance. We've already put out almost, I think, 100 hemlocks in the understory, and we will not treat them, and the goal is to let the genetics do the work. So that's how we deal with diseases. Yeah.
What's your favorite on the whole property? And then also too, what happens, do you ever worry if someone's going to take anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have no gates. Most gardens close up at night. They say goodbye to the visitors, and everything gets locked up. There are, anyone can walk in the middle of the night. Can someone, 3 years ago, some vandals came through and took some of our young trees in the rosaceous collection and yanked them out of the ground. At Christmas time, our youngest conifers from around the world, we have a spray paint that's brown to make them unappealing. It washes off eventually. This is the real world. People are jerks. And trust me, I can tell you they're still a minority of the people at the Arboretum, but I've had people banned from the Arboretum. We've had vandals do things to fences, and we've caught them. So it's just a part of being out actually unprotected. By and large, everyone is so really respectful, but it's shocking to see someone literally kill a tree. I mean, I just you feel sick to your stomach.
And what's the other question too?
Oh, well, my favorite? I would probably tell you that tortuosa is sort of a special tree for me. I love ginkgo, so I'm a huge ginkgo fan. But there's something extraordinary about standing under that tree, and I would encourage all of you to try it. Yeah.
I'm curious, what is the name of the this huge tree?
Oh, that's the Katsura tree. The Katsura. Cercidophyllum is the genus, and it's the one that smells like burnt sugar or cotton candy in the fall when its leaves start to turn a little bit of color. You'll be walking along and you think, wow, brown sugar, who's cooking? And it's the Katsura trees. They're beautiful trees. Yeah, and there's a Morioka, a Japanese tree. They're Chinese, but there's a tree that we found and brought out of Japan that's a special weeping variety. You can buy it in the trade, but we have the original on the grounds. So, yeah.
Can you talk about a couple of trees that have been endangered? The elms, the chestnuts. Are they going to come back?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different. We're going to have a big program on the chestnut. There's, of course, this American Chestnut Association that's been breeding, crossing in genes from the Chinese chestnut. I'm actually strongly opposed to that program. Genetic engineering will fix the problem without introducing thousands of genes of another species that can never be brought back out of the wild. But what I can tell you about the American chestnut is it's not extinct. It's not rare. It's everywhere if you just look around. What happens is the disease kills trees when they get to be about 20 years old. They get to about 20, 25 feet. They may reproduce, and they die back, and they sucker from their old root systems. And if you go into woodlands anywhere in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and you look, you will find that American chestnuts are there. My wife is in Connecticut, and when we walk in the woods, I can tell you right next to our house there are dozens of American chestnuts. Will they get old enough to reproduce and reestablish grand trees? No. They may well be on their way to evolving into being a very small tree. Or point mutations happen all the time. So we know from human genomes that on average each of us has about 80 or 90 point mutations that neither of our parents had, that we were born with. Their gametes bore mutations. It's perfectly normal. All of these little suckers that have been coming up all over the eastern U.S. of chestnuts still are mutating. And is it possible in 1,000 years that one will have a mutation? I don't know. But it's an amazing thing. We often take a very myopic or short term, but on the scale of thousands of years, chestnuts could come back or not come back, but they're still here. They're just never going to get large. But there is a team at the State University of New York, at the College of Forestry in Syracuse. They have figured out that upregulating a single gene of a product that's already in the tree changes the pH a little bit, and that knocks the pathogen back. And they're going through the regulatory process to actually see if they can get these trees released. Because what it will mean is that one single regulator of how much you make of something would be the only change you'd have to make to an American chestnut. Whereas the stuff that's been bred was 50-50 Chinese species, American species, then they back crossed. It's now 1/16. So that's 1/16 of the 25,000 genes in these trees are not American chestnut. I would not call that anything that approximates the repatriation of a species. So it's a really, what I would tell you is it's a really interesting discussion about the importance of genetic engineering in certain contexts. That doesn't mean every context. And the complexities of something that's totally unregulated, which is we can go and hybridize anything and release it in the wild. And there are no rules. Yeah.
What's so unique about oaks that they grow mushrooms at their base at the end of the
Well, they have fungal partners that actually live in their roots, and most plants actually have fungal partners that actually are part of it's a symbiosis, and it's called a mycorrhizal association. But we think the earliest land plants that moved out of water 475 million years ago actually moved out with a fungal partner to help them absorb nutrients. And it's actually it's a minority of plants on land don't have a fungal partner. So yeah, it's the great symbiosis of the last 500 million years is plants and fungi. It's a pretty nice thing. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, I know people are probably going to have to go home. Let me just take one more question. If you haven't asked me a question and you want one, way in the back, I'll just grab you there.
I think it's terribly unfortunate that you're not excited or informed.
Well, that's a perfect way to end.
Thank you so much for coming. Please sign up for our summer trip.